Hello, everybody. Back again. What is it this week? This week is 2001 A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. I'm trying to think. I don't think I've read an Arthur C. Clarke book on the channel yet. So, this will be a bit of a first. He's kind of famous. Famous Amos. He's kind of famous for being this, old school sci-fi guy, right? He wrote a bunch of these stories. So I was interested in general. But this one, obviously, the interest stems from the movie, right? And I think this is it's just the way it is nowadays. So many of our best stories are going to be made into movies. I don't want to say dominant medium. I don't know. I think books still can do more. On the whole, they might sell more. But there's so much now, right? There's so much that a lot of times we wait until something rises high enough to be made a movie to then say, "Oh, let me check this out." It's hard to find them in any other way, really. I mean, I've gone on Goodreads, I go on forums, I read lists, but those sort of haven't worked for me. Partially, that's why I made this channel, so that there can be some kind of strong opinions about whatever books there are out there, right? So some you might look at my opinions and say he really liked that and I thought it was stupid. Well, then you can then consistently go, I'll use his strong opinions to know what not to read. This kind of situation. In any case, that's sort of where I thought of this book. And so when I got a chance to read it, I jumped on it. Having said that, I think it's one of these situations where I tried not to relate it or compare it to the movie, but I think that's too hard to do. Especially if the movie's good, which 2001 is a great movie. So it started with some of that comparison, but then they quickly went their own ways. I'll get into it. Okay, let's see. This is a great book, by the way. My rating will be a 4 out of 5. It's not the full 5 out of 5 because I don't know when it was written. Back in the day. And so some of the things he's projecting over to the future, right? So some of the things that he projects maybe don't hold up, but more than that, it's some of the interests, right? Like if it's 1960, Velcro is a very interesting technology or whatever, right? But nowadays it doesn't strike the reader the way it should. So we have parts in space, the spaceships, the dockings, the this and that, which I don't think will hold a casual reader the way a 5 out of 5 will. They might get bored in those spots. It'll detract from the story. So it's not a 5 out of 5. Casuals, you can skip this one. For us readers, it is a highly, highly rated 4 out of 5. I think you'll thoroughly enjoy everything about this book. And it's not that long. Excuse me. It's not that long, which you would think goes against it, but it's very dense. It's very dense for how short it is. And I also think, in the sort of comparison realm, I don't think another director could have matched it. You needed Kubrick to bring the heat to even match this book. That's how good it is. And to me, this is the weirdest part because normally it's one or the other. Either the book is better than the movie or the movie is better than the book. See, how did I write this down? I, one's not better than the other. One's not one's not better than the other, but I can't really say they're different, but then they're clearly not the same. Right? It's kind of confusing. And what it is they both do, I would say they strike different chords, but they're both on the same instrument. Does that make sense? The movie the movie is more in the moment, present, moment to moment. It's more, I'd say, emotional, and the impact comes from those situations. Whereas the book is more expansive and I'd say less emotional, but maybe more thought provoking. And the sort of the impact that the emotion gives from the movie, you're gotten by the mental strain that this sort of invokes in you, I would say. Because they're both the same story, and the impact of each of those points in the story is sort of the same, but in a different way. It's very odd. I'd say they're like the same in a lot of ways. You're just getting more of different things at different times, kind of. It's weird. It's weird to say. I think it's the sounds, right? The book cannot use a soundtrack. But a soundtrack, this auditory affects you in a kind of a way. And I think that's the main difference. The sound can give a more moment by moment impact, but I don't think even the movie can cover the concepts that he covers the way it does when you read it. When you read it, you really get to chew on it, and all that brain activity kind of tires you out in a weird way. Not like you're tired, like you ran a marathon or anything, but anyone, if you like study for a test or something, or you just took a test, something you give your full attention to mentally, you leave kind of tired because there's a process happening in there, right? That's the real. You're tired in different ways. The same reader would be tired in different ways. I think that's a good way to say it. All right. So let's sort of get into the book. Because I did say earlier that some of what removes it from being a 5 out of 5 is sort of the space shuttle stuff. But you need it in two ways. One, I think the author was genuinely interested in space flights and how that would be, but it leads you to what he is sort of about. And I don't know many authors that are really like this, especially today. And I would say, again, even in like today's movies, we get a thing where we want to leave the ending open ended or leave it up to the viewer or the reader to distinguish or come to whatever conclusions they want. It's kind of cheap, right? And the cheapness is what he doesn't do. He looked out and he found big concepts, right? And he tackled those big concepts. He didn't shy away in any instance from any of his concepts. Drove right into them. Pulled the reader with him, right? We experience these big ideas. And he's not afraid, right? He doesn't overdo it, but he's also not afraid. He does it, and there's no point where he left you somewhere but he was afraid to go. That's what I really appreciate about this book. It's tremendous. We start with the man apes. Now our narrator is he knows all. Not a character, not a point of view. He knows everything. Right? So when we start with the man apes, he brings us down to sort of their eye level, how they perceive the world, how they're getting along. Very interesting, very primal, which is how it would be for man apes back, whatever, a million years ago or whenever they were. It's very fun. But there are moments where the sort of all-knowing narrator comes in. He'll be like, they picked up a rock and this changed humanity, this kind of thing, in and out. These man apes get, an obelisk shows up. They freak out. I like it. He's like, he has them freak out because they hear metal hitting rock. It's just a subtle thing that builds in you as you read this sort of the ominousness, even though you're like, why should I care about a man ape? You kind of do. I think they call him Moon Watcher. All these subtle little tricks give a character a name. You get some of his life. He's just trying to get by. He's basically half starving because there's not enough food. Right? It's just trying to get by, and then this monolith shows up. Now, if you know some ancillary information, this feeds on that. But let's say you don't. If you don't, it's just an interesting object. And it starts affecting our man apes, right? It hypnotizes them, makes them do various tests, throwing rocks, this and that. And you get a sense that it's affected this group of animals. I think it says at some point that there's a bunch all over. So it could affect whatever animal's ready. And the man ape was the best prepared to take in new knowledge. They go from touching this thing to using a weapon, right? They use a sharp rock to kill a pig. I think they eat it. Again, it's visceral. He doesn't shy away. I mean, you're gonna bludgeon a pig with a rock because it doesn't know you're a predator. Because man apes aren't predators at that point. It just sits there. It just takes it. The other ones don't even freak out. But then they eat it, and even the realization of I don't have to be hungry. I can eat flesh. Is this? It's not a light switch that flips. It's sort of like builds, right? Like I guess when something in your life happens that's sort of monumental, it doesn't hit you in the moment, and it's over the course of time, and you're like, oh my God, I've graduated. I finally did the thing, right? It just emanates out, so to speak. And it plays right if you don't know any ancillary information. But in my mind, what came up was a theory, a conspiracy theory of the show Ancient Aliens came from this theory. This theory being that civilization, not just civilization, like evolution was seeded onto our planet Earth by aliens. That's the theory. I don't know where it came. I'm trying to remember where it came from. I can't think of the guy's name right now. Apologies to that guy. But there are these theories. I think you've seen it if you've seen Prometheus. It's now here. Ancient Aliens, the whole series on History Channel. But they say, right, like the only way that explains the level of tech that you see when you see it, and then explains the speed of the evolution of mankind, because there's like jumps, according to them, from the man ape to having, the shape that we have. And that they say aliens came, right? So I have that thought in my head as I'm reading. I wonder if our author was thinking it too. I bet you dollars to donuts that he was. In any case, with that knowledge or without it, you still have the same effect, which is, an alien put. Well, you don't know. You don't actually know. Some advanced somebody, because it's a sci-fi book, right? In your head, you could be thinking it could be time travel or something silly like this, something crazy. But some higher something put that obelisk there. It's clearly doing tests. And then it grabs the man apes. And I just love that it's experiencing that conspiracy theory, right? And then we're seeing where the trail leads us. It's very fun. But it also got me thinking, which is it's the root of this book. It's the funnest part of it, is that it constantly makes you think. I was thinking, because it said, like, this wasn't the only one that had landed, and they were all over. And that some weren't able to deal, right? Like, it hypnotizes the tech, and it's too much for your brain and you die. So I was like, what if it had like grabbed like a kangaroo or something, some other kind of animal, some reptile? Would that, could we have had like reptile people? Or what if the Earth would have evolved reptile people, but because of this, like the Prime Directive, because they interfered, now it's humanity, and we weren't meant to occupy the planet. All these kind of ideas swirled in my head as we went along. It's very fun. And it spends a good amount of time with these man apes. It's very fun. It's an experience, which is I like when a book can find a way to get me to experience something that, you don't experience. It sounds basic, but so many times you read a story and you're like, well, I wonder what it'd be like to live in that castle. But they don't bother with it. They go off and do something else. Now, I don't consider that my fault as the reader. I consider that the author's fault for not directing me appropriately to what he wanted me to be interested in, right? So if I get veered off, then it's his fault. A, for letting me veer off, and B, for not feeding that interest. He doesn't do this. You don't veer at all. You're in the moment with these man apes. We then cut, from one chapter to the next. You do get there's an ominousness to it. The fact that these man apes at the end up killing other man apes. Right? It's the first conqueror. Right? But it's subtle and it's unspoken. But you get that sense, like, this is what we did with the knowledge. We start killing each other. He leaves you right there, then jumps right to modern times, which is not modern. But for the effects of the story, it could be whatever modern time you're reading it in. And if you would make slight adjustments, right? Like I was saying about the Velcro. We use Velcro to stay on the ground when we're in 0G in his ships. But if you would, like in your mind, not give that so much, not give the Velcro itself the emphasis, but emphasize the feeling that it's new tech, then you're right in line with wherever he wants you to go. Because that's essentially the space. We take a second to voyage up from Earth to the moon, because there's an issue. But that voyage, living through that voyage was futuristic to him, right? Would be less to us. But if we hang our hats on the effect and not the details, then I think the root of the story comes through. But this is the section I would say could lose casuals. Side note though, he he makes a point of saying, like, from where he's sitting, he has access to all the newspapers in the world. Which again is like, we have the internet. We're not. What do I care about reading a bunch of newspapers? Yeah, we've been there, done that. But it like illuminated a better point to me. We live in like a modern age, right? The information age. And what we've done with the information age is just, completely corrupt information. AI artists, right, are taking other people's art. Everyone's mad at that. I don't know if what I'm looking at's a deep fake or real. We're all pretty sure the news is lying at all points, whatever channel you go to. And so the fact that in his day, he thought what everyone would want to do, or what would be most interesting, was to be able to read all the news. And then it's like, because his generation didn't see the news as able to lie almost, right? Like it wouldn't happen. News from the 60s just wouldn't lie to you. It's a foreign concept. Whereas our generation would be like, I'm going to check my Twitter while I'm on this shuttle, because why would I bother with the news? It's just a bunch of lies. I love that, just this slight little change. We would both be looking at the device, right? We would both be spending the flight time. We have some daydreams about outer space, about seeing the planet like he does, but most of his time is in the ship, thinking of what he has to do, and then this wondering, in wonder at the idea that he can get all these newspapers. I just thought it was funny, because I'm like, we have access to all the newspapers, and we are not reading that crap. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, just watching videos, and we're all over forums yelling at each other, right? I just love the big difference. We would be on the plane yelling at each other. He doesn't want to tell anyone, but the problem they end up having is what they call Tycho Magnetic Anomaly 1, TMA 1. TMA 1 is, it's our obelisk, right? It's our monolith. It's our big black object. Now, if you've seen the movie, you know this is coming. But it's what I will say is, it doesn't lessen the impact, because as you're reading it, right, your journey is going to be different. It's like coming upon a city from a different road. You know the city's there, but you see in this completely different angle on it. It's highly enjoyable. This monolith shows up. They dug it up. They found a reading that was odd. They dug to the reading to something's hard. Then they excavated it completely out, and now they're sitting there looking at this thing. Now, for a while, they thought, was it the Chinese? Was it some foreign government? But all the scientists were quick to say, nah, it can't be that. It was buried under moon dirt. And that moon dirt only got there before China existed. So, couldn't have been the Chinese. Some of how they deal with it is inner, like, I wouldn't say exactly monologue, but inner thoughts, again from our omnipotent narrator, of scientific minds trying to come to grips with the reality of an alien object. Right? They ask all the best questions, all at the right time. Some of them are thinking, we missed the aliens. Some are thinking the aliens could be gone by now, like extinct. This could be an old technology that is talking to a race of people that don't exist. But they're both sure that it doesn't matter. That the proof of aliens are real is now real, and their minds are trying to deal with all the ramifications of that. They hide it from the public because they're scientists. But I think in reality, I think you would have to, right? I don't think any group. Well, I'd say I used to say that. I used to say that, but in like recent years, like now, like I think if an alien walked up, like on the White House lawn, I don't think anyone would care. I mean, we'd have a pocket of group here, and then another group would still be yelling about how much the DCEU sucks, and then another group would show up to the alien and be like, "Yeah, are you for or against abortion?" And he'd be like, "What is abortion?" And then another group would be like, "What do you think of the Justice Department not being fair to Trump?" And then another group would be like, "Are you going to vote for Biden?" Right? We're all just so in our field that I'm like, I don't know who goes in no man's land, but you're just going to get shot up. Right? I honestly think we might not care that much. Unless he came and started a war, and then we'd be like, well, we got to fight this guy. But if not, if you're just another tourist, or like, look, he's just a green guy, I don't care. I want to talk about abortion. Right? But we do have these thoughts in these scientists' minds, which is just, again, it's fun to, because their questions are valid, but it's fun to take those questions onto your timeline, right? One of them thinks, it's a fun concept. One of them thinks, what if this is a big food storage compartment for like an outpost? And the other one's like, well, it wouldn't give you much food. And then the first one's like, you don't know how big they are. It could be 4 inches tall, and there'd be food for years in there. And then the guy's like, you can't have a 4-inch tall intelligent race. You need more brain mass, right? So there's a back and forth there. And then it makes like one of its high pitched, it makes some kind of intense noise when when the sunlight hits it, I think. I think that's it. When the sunlight hits it, it makes this very intense noise. Which, again, I like when we, the reader, know something's up with it. Because we've been following it from the Stone Age, from prehistoric times. But it makes this kind of a noise. And it sends out a signal. We track the signal to somewhere. It sends this signal out. And so that's what moves us along. All the other dialogue between scientists, between government officials, between setting up what they want, the route of the plan, how it's going to, all the inner stuff, we just cut away from. We don't bother with that at all. We go right from there to a spaceship, because this is the ship they've picked to make its run. Now, they think they're going to make a run to Saturn or Jupiter and look around. But they're actually going to then divert them off to where the source of this signal is, so they can see what they can see. I think their thinking is that they follow the trail somewhere within our solar system. And if it goes out past that, we wouldn't be able to follow it anyway, I think. I think it's one of these situations. Now, I don't know about the secrecy to the crew. They keep it secret even from the crew for some reason. I'm not entirely sure. But I guess if you want to rely on, governments keeping secrets, I guess it's a good sound bet to make. They like to keep their secrets. It also brought up another concept in my mind. He didn't mention this, but he has most of the crew in a kind of a stasis, a hibernation. And I wonder about what that does psychologically to people, right? They have tests before you, I think, go on a submarine and I'm pretty sure before you go into space. So the isolation tests. I need to see how you will react if you know you cannot get out of whatever you're in, right? And they'll put it underwater or something to this effect. I've seen these tests before because they say you have some people. I mean, there's no real fault to them. They might not even know it about themselves. That just freak the crap out. They're fine. They pass every test. They're of sound mind. They don't have mental issues. Just the moment they know they're underwater or enclosed, and they're not claustrophobic. It's not so much claustrophobia. They don't care about the small space. They could sit in a box. But something about knowing that that amount of danger is outside, they just spaz out, right? So I'm like, if you hibernate someone for 8 months or a year or whatever long it takes to get to Jupiter or Saturn, and then you wake them up, they don't have the time it took to get there on the ship, right? So you might freak out a little, get used to it along the way. But if we get the technology and we use that, can you imagine waking up and knowing, you're whatever millions of miles away from any kind of thought of help. It's just you in the void of space. It's you in an inhospitable planet. No build up, you're just there now. I wonder if that's a good or bad idea, right? He wasn't thinking this, but I am. I'm wondering if that's a bad idea. I'm wondering if psychologically it'd be better to like make them sit a month in the trip before you hibernate them for the bulk of the months. I wonder. I don't know. My guess, I'm going to guess here. My guess is you shouldn't let them sleep all the way. You should make them come out for a good chunk of time in space before we start sleeping anybody. It's just people are finicky. People are finicky and weird stuff can happen. In any case, this doesn't happen in our story. It's just cool technology for him. In our story, this is to me it's the oddest jump he makes, and yet it still kind of works on the overall whole of sort of the concepts we're dealing with. Because I have this, okay, we have a computer, an AI computer named Hal. Now, it sort of becomes homicidal, right? There's talk amongst the crew that were awake that maybe we will turn it off if something goes weird. And the book explains better than the movie. The book explains that the government told Hal to lie, even to the crew. And that lie made an odd pathing in his programming. Right? Because he's built to serve the crew. But the lie is like a disservice. And so he kept constantly coming at odds with himself. And they say it as they sort of broke it. But I wonder if it kind of reads like, yes, he killed the crew, except for one guy. He killed, like, he killed one guy in a spacewalk. He just left him out there. Sucks to be that guy. He killed the rest of them in hibernation. They just never woke up. And then the last guy was able to shut him off. But I'm like, in my head, yes, we made the AI. In the story, it's an artificial intelligence. And it's programmed to do what we want. But we didn't program in the effects that the lie would have on him. So in a sense, that's new. So was that a new sentient kind of a entity? Right? And I feel like in some sense that was on a normal day. that would have been the discovery. And we'd go back to Earth with this sort of self-thinking, even if it's in a step, right? Even if it's gradual. He's in some way self-actualized. He's in Hal in some way doesn't want to die, doesn't want to be not what he is. And that would be worth studying, right? But we have this alien entity that we're trying to make contact with, and it supersedes it, right? So in the story, our guy doesn't go back. But for the story itself, right? Now that we, in my mind, have this sort of sentient thing, what humanity does with it is what we've done since the obelisk. Since we touched the obelisk as man apes, we kill it. The first thing we do with it is kill it, right? And I'm like, it's a heavy, subtle point that our author's making. In stages here. We killed Hal, and then we moved on. So in that sense, what should be out of left field, which is a homicidal AI, doesn't fit the story the rest of the way, fits right in line with the rest of the story. Wonderful, wonderful writing. He gets to somewhere, a moon of Saturn, I think. I think it's a moon of Saturn. And he looks down. I think he sees a giant obelisk. It's just ginormous, miles and miles across. The same black, the same light absorbing. Which I forgot to mention is another fun point. It's a simple. What's the word I want to use? It's a simple writing device. Just an object that absorbs all light. Something about like pure blackness. Where, we're so used to everything reflecting some amount of light in it that something can just emanate no light. We're drawn to it a little bit. Even today, like your highest end screens, that's like one of the tests they have is how black the screen can be. So I like that. Very cool. We get a description of our aliens in a sort of a roundabout way. Because I thought he'd leave it a mystery, right? I think in the movie, we don't get any sense of the creatures, the aliens themselves. Just they're having this effect on humanity. But here he gives us a sense of them. A sense of them leaving these obelisks, these monoliths all throughout the galaxy. They're on a search for other sentient races. But then he says, like in the time that they've placed it from now, they've continued to evolve. I think they evolve right into no longer needing physical bodies. They put themselves in metal and plastic bodies. They start to rust. And they even start to leave these behind in some sense. It gets way out there. It gets way out there. And so he says, like in essence, the race that left them aren't there. But they're not gone either. He goes and he's like... He gets close to this obelisk and it activates in a kind of way. And this part, you almost got to read it to fully grasp what happened because he's getting real conceptual with what's happening. He gets very conceptual. I think the last thing the guy says that Earth hears is, it's full of stars. Oh my God, it's full of stars. And that's the last thing they hear because they don't know. He gets sucked into it. It sucks him in. Then turns off, leaves the ship empty, doesn't care about the ship. And then he goes through a kind of a process. And it's like hyper-evolution or something to this effect. Right? It evolves him, I think, up to where they are. It's very wild. And I'm like, I got to give credit to the movie for trying to show it. It showed it as best as it could. But it's such a wild conceptual idea of what's happening to this guy, the evolution that he has. It's a perfect way for the book to tail end. He then gets sent back as a star child. That's what they say. He calls the big thing a star gate, which I think is the first time that term was used. Made a great show. Not related. It's just that's what it reminded me of in my head. It's not a round Stargate. It's a big obelisk. He sends. He does. They don't send the guy back. I don't think he has an interaction with them. They just show him like new realities, new possibilities, right? They evolve him and then let him do what he wants to do. It's very cool. It's way out there. He goes back to Earth. He goes back to Earth and he sees. Now, the way they describe it, he's like, there's something in my sky I don't like. He says, I want a clean sky. And so he, like, just with his thought, makes it go away. And then our author subtly describes, I think, a nuclear explosion. Where they were either shooting nukes at him or they had nukes on, like, like James Bond, they have him on a satellite ready to. But he clears that out, and you see all these nukes. But he describes it from the Star Child's point of view, not from our point of view, which is we'd be horrified if nukes started going off in space. He describes it like here, like there's a blooming of light and heat, but it dissipated. Right? I love the perspective. And then he ends the same way our man ape ended, with he knows he rules the earth. Doesn't know what he's going to do with that. But he knows he's going to do something. And that's how it ends. It is a fantastic book. Now, I left. You can't really. The fun. Again, some of the fun is in these descriptions, these thoughts outside that I had. But then the other half of the fun is these descriptions of these very conceptual ideas. And that is worth the price of admission. I don't know how expensive this book would be to get. You probably get it at a library. Give it a read, people. Give it 100% a read. All right. Ads! I can't say my books are better than this one. If you want to read a book, you're like, are your books better than this? I'm like, I'm not going to say that. This is so good. Go give it a read. I should have checked if it's on Kindle Unlimited, to be honest, since that's what I use a lot nowadays. But these are my books. And if you want to help the channel, go buy them. Probably it'll help somehow. And I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Like I've been saying, these are very fun to do. All right. See you next week.